E-bike maintenance may seem a little bit daunting or even impossible for some, especially if you're a beginner. But in this video, I'm going to use this bike to show you a few basic tips and tricks for maintenance on your e-bike in order to keep you out on the trails longer and to keep a little bit more money in your pocket. My name is Travis and welcome to the BAKCOU YouTube channel, where we cover all things electric bikes, electric scooters, laws on e-bikes, maintenance tips, how to ride, even some of the products that we offer like our trailers or our side saddlebags. If you want to join our community, then definitely subscribe to the channel down below, leave some comments so we can answer all of your questions, and leave a like for us if this video helps you out, because that really helps us out. First thing that we want to check is the handlebar stem here. If that is loose, then that means your handlebars may be a little bit loose and it's going to be a little bit trickier to control the direction of your bike. You may notice if you're turning your handlebars but your wheel is staying a little more straight, then that could mean that your handlebar stem or your headset is loose. So using a 5mm and a 4mm hex key, I'm going to show you how to tighten this. So this is the area that you're going to be looking for, this top bolt and then these two side bolts here on your handlebar stem. Now this is an e-bike, so I did have to move my display. If you have this type of display, you can get a 2.5mm hex key, loosen these two bolts here, and then just twist it forward like that. Now that mine's ready, what you want to do is loosen these side bolts here first. Not all the way, but just enough so that you can tighten this top one here. So before you tighten them, you can kind of just look over your handlebars, make sure they align perpendicular with your front tire. So when your handlebars are straight, your tires are going straight, and then you're good to go on the trail. So that is definitely one thing you want to watch out for if you're ever touching these bolts. Make sure when you tighten them that everything is straight and back to its default position. So grab your 5mm and you can tighten this bolt here, which compresses the cups and the bearings on the inside of this headset. So now that that's tight, you can grab your 4mm again and then just get these tight. Maintaining the suspension on your e-bike is a very critical thing to do, especially if you have an air suspension fork and rear shock, because there's two different types of suspension. There's air and there's coil. On most of our bikes, they are air, so we're going to be covering that and how to maintain the air inside of your fork and your rear shock. What you're going to need to do that is a shock pump. So this is specific just for your fork and the rear shock if you have a full suspension bike. And it has a little gauge on it, and this shows you the air pressure, or the PSI, inside of your suspension. And you want your front fork to be at about 150 PSI just as a good starting point, and your rear shock, if you have a full suspension bike, to be at about 180 PSI. Again, those are just starting points. You can customize it to whatever you want. So as I was editing this video, I realized that I didn't go deep enough into this. If you're like me and you weigh a little bit more, I weigh 240 pounds, you're gonna want more pressure in your rear shock. I ride mine at about 225 to 230. That's going to support you better. If you weigh less, like if you're 180 to 200 pounds, you might want less. So you're going to have 190 to 200 PSI. There's charts that you can follow for weight and height for the different levels of PSI that you should have in your shocks. But it is a little bit deeper than just having a starting point. So make sure you customize your air suspension specifically to you. But before we actually get into putting more air pressure into your fork and rear shock, I need to show you what's called checking your sag. So this is how you test or measure the amount of air that is in your fork and shock. So on your rear shock, if you have a full suspension bike, you will notice there is a 20, 30, and 40% line. On these lines, when you sit on the bike with just your body weight, you want to be at about 30%. That's kind of manufacturer recommendations. Again, you can customize it to whatever you want, but that's where we're gonna be putting it. On your front fork, I like to say with just your body weight, when you're checking your sag, you go just about 1/3 of the way up when you put some body weight onto it. So the way that you do that, on your shocks, you have these O-rings, And so you want to move this O-ring all the way to the top of the shock, and then same thing on your fork. You have an orange O-ring over here, and you're going to want to put it down closest to the fork, so when you compress it, that O-ring will move up, and on your rear shock, the O-ring will move down, and then we can measure your sag. Just sit on it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to put a ton of pressure or anything. Just put your body weight, just sit on it. Now, if you are using these bikes for hunting or bike packing or camping or anything, and you plan on carrying a heavier load, like a heavy backpack, or maybe you're pulling a trailer, or you've got thicker clothes on because it's colder outside, you want to wear those and have everything on you while you're checking your sag, so your bike can be tuned properly to the weight that the rider will be. So again, you're just going to want to sit on the bike. Same thing on the front, just put a little bit of pressure onto it, and then you hop off, and then you're going to check the O-ring, and this O-ring here on mine is way too low. It's below 40%. So what we're going to want to do is put more air into this rear shock. And the ring on my front fork, the way that you test that is just give it a little bit of a pressure like that. If it goes about 1/3 of the way up, then you're good. That means you have some good pressure in there around that 150 PSI mark, like I said before. If it bottoms out, obviously you need to put more air. And if you can't move it at all, or it's locked out, then maybe there's a little bit too much air in there. What you need to do is you need to grab your shock pump, like I was telling you about before, and remove your Schrader valve cap, which is just right there, off of your shock. Place the pump onto it. Now with this valve, you're gonna twist it on. Use the lever to lock it. That time, I can feel the air pressure in the pump now, and my PSI gauge moved. Now, for my body weight, it's at 200, and I know I said 180 is a good starting point, but being at 200 and I weigh about 250 pounds, I'm gonna need more air in there if I want it to be at 30%. So, now that that is there, you just start pumping. Remember, when you're checking your sag, you wanna make sure that your O-ring is all the way to the top. So I'm going to sit back down on my bike. I'm just getting my body weight on it, stand back up, I'm gonna sit back down again, and up. Check your O-ring, and now it's right at 30%, so that means my shock is customized to my weight. So moving on to the front fork, first remember you're going to need a shock pump, and to do this it's gonna be just about the same as you saw for the rear shock. You're gonna remove the air cap on the fork, screw on the Schrader valve, and then check the PSI using your shock pump. It's very common for the shifting cable that runs along from your shifter down to your derailleur stretches just a little bit as you're riding, and so I'm going to show you how to use the barrel adjuster in order to tune your gears properly. So while you're riding your e-bike, you definitely don't want your chain to be doing this. It's jumping gears, it's not shifting as easily, it feels really, really loose. Something that I need you to understand is that when your shifting looks like that on your cassette, it's most of the time has nothing to do with the bolts and the screws and the things on your derailleur, and it has everything to do with the tension on your shifting cable that leads from your shifter down to your derailleur. Don't touch these bolts at all, don't touch this, don't even worry about this. We're gonna go to the front of the bike and I'm gonna show you what's called the barrel adjuster. This piece right here is what is called the barrel adjuster. It goes on the cable that leads from your shifter down to your derailleur. As you twist it, that's how you're going to put more tension on your shifting cable, which is what's going to help your shifting problems. Instead of touching all of the derailleur stuff, all you have to do is give this a few twists and clicks, and it's going to be tightening your shifting cable. So now you can see as I shift it up and down, it's going one gear at a time, it's shifting properly, it's not skipping gears. Now we know that we've tightened the shifting cable just right with using only the barrel adjuster. As you ride your e-bike out on the trail, your chain is going to get dirty. It's going to get covered in grime and dust and dirt, as well as just the regular grease that the chain is going to be producing as you use it. So it's really important to keep your chain clean, and to do that, all you're going to need is some chain degreaser and then some lube as well. There's a couple ways that you can do degreaser on your chain. You can drip some drops and then use like a brush and scrub it. They also have these like bathhouse things that wrap around the chain. You spin the wheel and then it cleans the chain like that with a brush though. So if you have a brush, that works as well. And as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you are getting the degreaser on the inside of the chain and not the outside, because then as gravity, pulls these drops down, it's going to stay on that chain. So we're done applying the degreaser now. I don't have a brush here with me. This is actually a brand new bike, and so the chain isn't very dirty. But like I said, if you just have like a bristle brush at home, you could even use a toothbrush. Just get that degreaser on there and then scrub the chain, but also let it sit for a minute and let that kind of eat away at the grease. Now, while I'm letting my degreaser go to work here, cleaning that chain, once it's done, all you have to do is rinse it off with some water. And then when you're done with that, you have to make sure to dry your chain. I would even suggest to let it air dry after you've used a rag to try and get all the water off. Because if you have water droplets or any sort of water on your chain and then you apply lube to it, the lube is only going to lock in that moisture and it will trap the water in the chain, and then it's gonna lead to it's not working properly, it's going to get rusty, and you're gonna have to replace the chain and then even possibly the cassette. And that just becomes expensive, and it's something you don't wanna do. So when you're done cleaning it with the degreaser and you're done spraying the degreaser off, make sure the chain is dry before applying the lube. I mentioned earlier that this is a brand new bike, so the chain has not been outside and been ridden very much. I'm gonna show you though how important it is to keep your chain clean, just because it's going to be building up grease and it's gonna be building up a little bit of grime on there. And even with a brand new chain and using this degreaser, that's what we took off of the chain. So it's really important to keep your chain clean for how easily it can get greasy and grimy. You need to know that there is a proper way to apply the chain lube and an improper way to do it. You want to always apply your lube on the links on the inside of the chain. So this chain here is around the bike and the inside is in here, because then as your chain moves and spins, the lube will be pulled into the links and it won't just fall off. Because if you apply it to the outside of the chain, then this lube is just going to drop off of your chain and it won't properly lubricate the chain links, and then you're gonna just have a grinding, creaky chain while you're on the trails. The best way, I think, to properly lubricate every piece of your chain is to just one by one slowly hit these links where they are connected with a little bit of lube, because that's where you want the lube to be. As you can see, e-bike maintenance doesn't have to be expensive. In this video, I've covered how to check your headset or your handlebar stem to make sure it's all tightened properly before you ride, how to clean, degrease, and lube your chain, how to tune up your gears if your chain seems like it's skipping on your cassette, and then also checking the pressure in your suspension. And remember, if you don't have a full suspension bike, the suspension in your fork is just as important to be at the proper air pressure if you have an air suspension fork. As a little reminder before we go, on this YouTube channel, we have lots of videos on maintenance, how to ride your bike properly, even down to products that we offer like trailers that you can hook up to your bike and take out on the trails with you. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments below. If I've missed anything that you would like to see as a maintenance tip or thing for your e-bike, please let me know. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us to create more videos and to grow our audience and our BAKCOU community to help everyone out there ride their e-bikes properly and to save a little bit of money in their pocket to not be taking their bike to the shop every other ride if they have an issue. So thanks for watching and happy riding.